Hello, everyone. Today, I just want to kick off by saying thank you to everyone. I received all your messages and the emails that have been sent across, and I will try as much as possible to do justice to all the questions that we were asked that were asked via email. Um, so I want to start off with just teaching a couple of things, after which I attend to the questions. So I think a good place to begin from is what's marital abuse or intimate partner violence, as we fondly refer to it. Um, when we talk about intimate partner abuse, we're talking about a set of actions carried out by one partner on another partner with the aim of achieving control in the relationship. And I repeat, intimate partner violence or domestic violence or whatever form of abuse is a set of actions carried out on another partner by one in the aim to maintain control in the relationship. And when we sit with clients, this is something that has become very prevalent in society, because for every week we have loads of cases where people are coming in to complain about how their partners are treating them. And this is something that's very worrisome, because it tells you that where we are currently is a situation where people are stressed out. People are at a point where they are frustrated. People are struggling in different aspects of their lives. And one of the key things you start to notice is that all these people, it all affects how they relate with their partner. Because that's the person who sees you every day when you wake up, that's the person who sees you when you go to sleep. And in a situation where you are in an environment, home environment, healthy home environment, quote unquote, where you get to see your partner each and every day, this is something you must be very careful about, because people always will take out their frustrations on whoever is closest to them if they do not know how to handle these concerns carefully. Now, when we talk about intimate partner violence, it's important for us to talk about the things that cause it. Because this was one of the questions that I was asked by one of the emails we received. They wanted to know what causes intimate partner violence. And it's interesting for you to find out that when you talk about intimate partner violence, one of the things you find out that could cause intimate partner violence could be things like the educational level of the people. Yes, I see you. Welcome, Chuku Kadibia. Welcome, Maya. Welcome, babes. I see you guys. One of the things that causes intimate partner violence is the level or the quality of education of the people involved in the marriage itself. As much as we're not saying that people who aren't formally educated cannot be in a relationship together, what we're simply saying is that the quality of education they have also predisposes them or opens them up to certain levels of information that helps them determine what abuse and properly define what abuse is in their relationship. For instance, somebody who grew up in a home where they saw their mother kneel down to serve their father. To the people who did it at the time, it wasn't a problem. But for the people who are here, babes, I see you say, what can be done to avert this abusive relationship? I will answer that question. What can be done to avert abuse? Good. So for people who grew up in this kind of homes, you generally tend to see that they are more. It's almost like they've been primed to condone a measure of abuse, because for them that's the norm they see, that's the norm they know. And for people who have been privy to expanding their horizons, learning more, one of the things you generally tend to find out with them is that as much as they may have come with preconceived notions of what abuse is and what it isn't, or maybe they've been primed by someone in their background who taught them how to become people who were slightly maybe well, anyways, people who would be abusive, borderline abusive, all in the name of respect. When you find out that this is something that happens, it makes you get to a point where you start to understand that, hey, the fact that this was what I grew up in doesn't make it right. Now, for people like this, one of the things you generally tend to see is that they get to a point where they learn and they correct it. But for people who are not as exposed as they ought to be and who are not as educated, they are the ones who usually end up falling victims in all of this. Because what they know is limited, and with that limitation, there isn't any other outlet that helps them improve on what they already know. Having said this, another thing I'd like to write out here is what we call low self-esteem. In a situation where you have someone who their esteem levels may not be healthy enough, you find out that the moment they're able to subject someone else to either verbal, emotional, or physical abuse, this is where they get their strength from. This is what makes them feel stronger as individuals. And the stronger they feel, the more abuse they perpetrate on the victim. Now, another thing that I brought out here that could help you is what we call poor communication in the marriage itself. Poor communication by itself is a challenge, because as long as you're not able to communicate healthily to your partner, there will be a lot of misinterpretation, a lot of things will be lost in transit, and to make up for this lack of communication, a lot of people, out of frustration, decide to go to a point where they start to abuse a partner. And you see, when we talk about abuse, we're not talking about you having to beat someone, or you, because that's what most people will term abuse. And this is the reason a lot of women and men in relationships are not able to properly classify what they are going through. Because for most people who are in abusive homes, when you sit with them, thank you so much, Brian, I see you, please do recommend the page. When you sit with people who are in abusive marriages or relationships, the first challenge you generally get to see with them is that these people do not even where they understand whether they are being abused or not. And because they don't understand whether they're being abused or not, they can't even comfortably and confidently exit relationships that are abusive in nature. And because they can't do this, you hear reasons such as, oh, I'm still here because of the children. I want the children to have a healthy family unit. But the truth is, the family unit is already unhealthy. Whereas the right action to take at that point is to either go get external help, or in a situation where you have gotten external help and it hasn't done any good, the next line of action to take for you will be to at least opt for a separation. At least a separation still gives you an opportunity to come back stronger as a couple, rather than insisting that both of you coexist within the same environment, and at the end of the day, the damage becomes irreparable. Now, aside from this point that has been mentioned, another thing that I would also like to write down for you guys here is finance. Money plays a big role in abuse in homes. Homes where you find out that there's a lot of finance going around, the level of abuse and the genre, the type of abuse they go through in those homes sometimes differ to the abuse that the families where there's little or nothing to go around have to condone or have to live with. Now, having spoken about all of this, I think it will be important to mention that when we talk about abuse is something that everybody must be primed to identify in their marriage. Now, abuse could come in different ways, like we already know. It could be verbal, where somebody's talking to you, talking down at you, saying harsh words to you, or saying things that are condescending to you. At that point, what happens to you is that you start to lose your self-esteem. Abuse could also show itself in a situation where someone is being physically abusive, where they beat you, where they shove you, where they pull you, regardless of how it happened, about what they are going through in their marriages. You will find out that one partner starts to block off the other partner. The other partner wouldn't talk to them for weeks on end. You have a partner who you're trying to make up with, but they cannot, or they do not want to speak back in return. They'd rather give you the silent treatment. And in giving you the silent treatment, you get to a point where you start to lose it. You're losing your marbles because you're now there with someone who you're not happy with, but you're not also given an opportunity to resolve whatever the concerns are. That by itself constitutes emotional abuse. And you see, when you're in a home where money has become a tool, rather than a tool that helps solve problems, it becomes a tool for control. That by itself also constitutes financial abuse, where you're using money to sway decisions in your favor within your home. Now, looking at the questions I received from you said, what can be done to avert abuse? Simply put, to avert abuse, every single thing I mentioned, such as finance, things like quality of education, you must read. You must get to a point where you educate yourself on what exactly is abuse, so that when you start to become abusive, you do not hide under the fact that you are not aware of what it constituted. Ignorance by itself is not an excuse. A lot of marriages are constantly plagued with the fact that some partners claim to be ignorant of what constitutes abuse. I've had people sit in sessions and tell me things like, oh, I didn't know it was abuse because all I did was keep to myself. Others will tell you, I made the money, so I don't understand why not giving it to him or giving it to her will constitute abuse. And so on. So as long as you're aware of what constitutes abuse, what it does is it keeps you very alert in your marriage. It keeps you very organized and focused to know when these things start to crop up. Now, one last thing I'd like to mention is this. When we talk about abuse, there are different ways it comes up, but there are about 4 basic things you need to watch out for in your home. First of all, there's something we call tension build-up. Tension build-up is when you and your partner get to that part where there's nothing wrong at home. Nothing has happened. Nobody is fighting anybody. But you're starting to notice something. You're starting to notice that there's a lot of tension. Everybody's creeping around on glass at home because nothing has gone wrong yet, but you can almost feel that something is going off. And then tension begins to build up. Then you get to the point where there's an event, the abusive event. The abusive event is the actual thing that happens. It could be verbal, it could be physical, it could be emotional, it could be financial. And the moment that happens in your home, you get to that tipping point where you find your partner now being very nice and apologetic, which is what we call the stage of calm, because now things start to simmer down after the eruption. Things start to simmer down and there's a stage of calm, or what others call the honeymoon phase. The honeymoon phase is where they've apologized for everything they did. They said they're sorry, but you find out that with that apology, there's no actual work being put in. It's just words. It's not being backed up by anything substantial. And once you get to this point, you now move from the honeymoon phase to what you call the stage of calm. The stage of calm is when, for a while, nothing goes wrong. Both of you seem to be in a good place again. Nothing has gone wrong. But from there, you find out that you gradually begin to move to tension build up again. Things begin to get tense around the home. Things begin to get you're getting edgy around your partner again. And from that tension build up stage, you find yourself going all the way to an eruption, an abusive event. again. And before you know it, you're on this cycle and hooked to this cycle. And there's an aspect of this cycle that is addictive, because the euphoria when you feel after you make up with your partner, what it does to you is it gets you to that point where you constantly look forward to it. Rather than fixing the real concerns both of you have, you're both caught up with the euphoria of making up after an incident or after an abusive incident. Suddenly you guys are moving around arm in arm, going to places, having fun, rather than fixing the real issues. If you want to exit the abuse cycle, simply sit down with your partner and have a conversation around the real concerns you have. Communicate healthily. And while you're communicating, also understand that the other person listening must also be actively listening to what you're saying to them. Because after that, you swap roles. They get to listen, you get to communicate. After that, you swap roles again. They get to communicate while you get to actively listen. Now, for people who are caught up in all of this, I would advise you that the first thing you do is do not try to coexist with abuse, because abuse will gradually keep pushing the envelope until it gets to a day where whatever incident happens between you and your partner, you will simply just notice that it gets progressively worse. We hear stories of people who wake up one day and kill their partners. These are people who, when the abusive incidents between them started, it wasn't that serious. It wasn't such a serious thing. But as they went along, it got progressively worse. Now, having said this, I think it's important to mention that, you see, there are certain things that you must notice in your spouse or in your marriage for you to know that your marriage might be an abusive one. The first thing I wrote out here for you is what we call the hypercritical spouse. A spouse who, when you do things, they're hypercritical towards you. They don't let go. The second thing I wrote out here for you is spouses who ignore your boundaries and your privacy. They have no regards whatsoever for your boundaries. The next thing I wrote out here for you is you struggle to call them out. And the reason you struggle to call them out is because they've gotten to a point where they've been able to convince you, whether it was something that was done, that you were aware of, or something that was done subconsciously. Truth is, they have gotten to a point where they have programmed you enough to a point where you struggle to call them out on the issues they may present or the abuse. Because a lot of things have been said. You're thinking of a lot of things. A lot of things are going wrong. Lexi, I see you. How do I cope if my spouse tries to be acknowledging? Okay, Lexi, could you help me rephrase that question a bit? When you say acknowledging, what are they agreeing to? Could you rephrase that for me? The next thing you ought to look at here is when you start to tiptoe around your partner. Both you and your partner are at home, but you find out that you've lost the ability to be free with them. That sometimes points to the presence of an abusive environment. The next thing I have here for you is gaslighting and isolation. When a partner isolates you from a group of friends, people both of you used to know, suddenly you find out that they're not going there with you anymore. They'd rather go see these people alone. Or when they get to a point where they trigger you to a point where you react, or where they say things to you that make you react. Gaslighting comes in a lot of ways, and it's a topic we're going to treat subsequently. So these are some of the things: yelling, shifting blame, and a lot of that. These are the things that happens when you get to a point that your home or your marriage has become abusive. Yes, Lexi, try to feel our round. So how do I cope if my spouse tries to be acknowledging? Try to feel our round. Okay, so Lexi, let me just answer what I think you're asking here. So when your spouse tries to acknowledge that they have been abusive, one of the key things you can do for yourself is that you get to a point where if they acknowledge it, then you ask them to put in the work. Because acknowledging the fact that you have been abusive is one thing, but getting to a point where you put in the work, put in the communication that helps you and your partner move beyond abuse, that by itself is the second aspect of the work. And that's the most important thing for couple, and that becomes the difference between people who exit the abuse cycle and people who stay in the abuse cycle, the work. So after they have acknowledged it, ensure that they put in the work. I had another question here that asked me, what would you consider abuse? So pretty much like I had explained prior to, abuse comes in different shapes and forms. Abuse could be physical, which is where somebody initiates unwarranted touch that has an element of force to it. It could be physical. It could be emotional, where you find out that a partner is stonewalling you, not wanting to speak with you, not wanting to engage with you, despite knowing that whatever they have done hurts you or still hurts you, but they decide to close up emotionally. You can see them, but you can't access them. That by itself constitutes emotional abuse. Another thing is what we call financial abuse. Financial abuse is when you find out that you struggle in a home where money, rather than being a tool for solving problems, has become a tool that's weaponized for control. Meaning that as much as we are not in a good place, whenever you need money, you have to come to me. So when you have to come to me, it means that you must engage with me. Once it's financial, and the moment you come to me, that's when I bring out myself. That's when I bring out myself to do what I need to do. Madike Foundation, I see you. You said, can an abusive marriage be tamed, or can a marriage or a relationship that is abusive be reversed? Well, before you came in, I had said something. In our line of work as therapists, once you hear of the existence of abuse in a marriage, your first go-to place is to ensure that you ask the couples involved to go and get professional help. Because for the fact that your marriage has gotten to an abusive place simply means that both of you have lost the ability to fix things. So the first thing you need to do is get to a point where you go and seek professional help. But if professional help has been sought at some point, and whatever is happening in your home still persists, it is advised that you opt for a separation. There is no need trying to stay together and piling up more resentment for each other. It is best you opt for a separation. A separation could be but make sure that separation is a timeline both parties agree to, because a separation that is not agreed to could subsequently become a divorce. So you must put a timeline to it, discuss it, sort it out amongst yourselves, tell yourselves for 1 month we'll be apart. Then list out the things that need to be worked on while you're apart, because those are the things you're coming back with to go through as a couple. So while we were apart, these were before we went apart rather, these were the things we decided we were going to work on. But now, a month has elapsed, or 3 months has elapsed, or a year has elapsed, and we have these things that we're looking forward to. So what has been done? What has been sorted out? Have you been able to? Can I categorically state that you have changed? Because there's no need going back in if you see that the things you had complained about still exist. So just to quickly answer your question now, when you are in a relationship or a marriage that is abusive, it can be fixed when both parties are willing to work on it and work on the important things. But in a situation where you do not work on the important things, I can guarantee you that a separation might be better for you. And if at the end of the day these things aren't worked on and aren't sorted out, a divorce naturally will happen, with or without your consent. Madike Foundation, you said, won't the separation cause divorce? Which is why I said, for a separation, you must append a timeline to it. The timeline must be appended to a separation. If not, it becomes a divorce. M&M, what coping strategies can I use in dealing with emotional abuse during guilt trapping from spouse? Now, when you get to a point where the spouse starts to guilt trap you or guilt trip you, one of the things you could do is get to a point where you have a strong social support. Because one of the things an abusive person does to you is they take pleasure in the ability to separate you, in their ability to separate you from loved ones. Because the more they're able to separate you from the people who truly care for you or care about you, therein lies their power to inflict harm and inflict damage. So you must have a strong support system. Secondly, you must be aware of what type of abuse you're going through. You must educate yourself on abuse. You must educate yourself on trauma. You must educate yourself on gaslighting and the different ways it shows up, be it with the blame game, be it with minimization. You must be able to train yourself so that you can call out whoever it is, the abusive spouse, or whatever it is the abusive spouse does. You should be able to call them out on their BS after you have identified what it is. So that's how you cope in a situation where you're being guilt-tripped or you're still in an abusive marriage. Coping does not, and one thing I'd like to say here is this, because I hear a lot of people tell me things like, oh, we're still here because, or I'm still here because, of my children. I'm still here because I may not have the financial wherewithal to make certain moves right now. I'm still here because where we come from, we don't, separation is not a thing to be considered. Well, where you come from, death is also not a thing, especially death in the hands of a spouse is also not a thing anybody condones. Because we have seen extreme situations where people have had to do all of that, even to the point where they endured, to the point where they were hurt by a spouse. So I think that's about it for the day. Guys, thank you so much for your time, and until we come in again and have another conversation, stay good, stay healthy, stay mentally alert. Take care of yourselves, guys. Does anyone have any other last questions for me? I can take one last question before I leave. Okay, in the absence of none, guys, it's been a good morning. So, morning, everyone. I will see you guys again. And until then, take care of yourselves. All right, bye-bye.